What's going on YouTube? Today I'm going to show you how to make a man's table, the perfect addition to any family room, regardless of what the wife might say. Anyways, this particular one is actually spoken for. It was custom made as a raffle piece for the Iron Dog competition coming up for Spike's Canine Fund. If you're not familiar, check it out. I'll leave a link in the description. This particular one is 4 feet by 2 feet. We got an assortment of 9mm, 223, some 12 gauge, a little bit of everything in there. It has magnetic gun mounts on the bottom to hold your 454 Casull in place, because you just never know when you might need that. Oh, and why am I holding a chicken? Because I couldn't find an eagle that would let me hold it. But this particular chicken is identifying as an eagle today, which is practically the same thing in today's world. Anyways, let's get started. I'll show you how I made this. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Alright, I got a couple oak slabs I'm working with. First thing I'm doing is I'm trimming these to a little over 4 feet long. Final dimensions of the coffee table are going to be 4 feet by 2 feet, so starting out I'm going to give myself a couple extra inches to work with. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this track saw and I'm going to cut about 10 inches off of each slab. So when I'm done here, that'll give me two pieces that are about 4 feet long and about 10 inches wide, which will give me a resin river going down the middle of about 4 inches. Obviously you can adjust the size of that river by making your slabs a little wider or shorter. After getting my pieces cut to size, I'm going to go ahead and run everything through the planer. This takes several passes on each side. My recommendation is after each pass, kind of flip it to the other side and rotate between the two, and it seems to work the best. Okay, like I said before, I originally cut these a little bigger than I needed to. I did that on purpose. Now that I'm kind of moving along, I am trimming these down to the actual size that I need them, which is 4 feet. Next step is getting rid of this bark, just kind of using a hammer and chisel, and then moving on to a grinder just to get all the fine stuff off. So this step certainly isn't required, but I kind of had a random idea to take a torch and just put a little bit of burn marks onto the edge here. I thought that might help make it look good. Now I'm applying some stuff called PC Petrifier. What this does is seals the end of the wood, kind of hardens up any soft spots, but I found it does a good job of help preventing bubbles from leaking out of the ends here and getting into your epoxy. Okay, we are getting ready for some resin. So I'm taking a little bit of silicone, putting it on the bottom of these boards, and that'll help prevent resin from getting underneath and just causing more work for me. Alright, time to mix up some resin. I'm just using some standard tabletop resin here for this first pour. First pour, only doing about 1/4 of an inch, so not real thick. Doing a couple different shades of blue and mixing some gray in there as well. Okay, the tabletop resin's dry, so now we're getting ready for a deep pour, putting in some 12 gauge, 9mm, and some 223 rounds. Okay, mixing up the deep pour resin here, and if you noticed before, I stood all my casing straight up, and when you do that, if you pour the resin into the casings, it eliminates most of the bubbles once you knock them over. And speaking of knocking over, usually I just come back with a couple of popsicle sticks and do that. And don't forget to take a torch afterwards for those few remaining bubbles. Okay, about a week later, ready to get this thing out of the mold. Now, if you remember earlier when I siliconed these boards in place, there are pros and cons to everything. The pro is it helps resin from leaking underneath your wood and making a mess. The con is, well, sometimes it's a royal pain in the ass to get these things loose. It works better if you use a quick dry silicone, which I clearly did not. And I struggled with this thing for several minutes before I could finally get it to break loose. Okay, now it's time to flatten this thing out. I am using the Woodpecker's slab flattening mill, although as you can see it's essentially just a big router sled. If you hadn't used one of these before, Woodpecker's makes a really nice one. This probably takes a good hour as you gotta go slow and you're only doing a couple inches at a time, and you gotta do both sides. So here's a lesson when you're putting things in resin. Make sure you have enough room. And here I did not and shaved a tiny bit off of my shotgun shell. And after getting everything out of the mold, I had one side that wasn't perfectly square, so that's all I'm doing here is just fixing that. Sanding. Pretty self-explanatory. It's my least favorite part. I hate it, but it's hard to make a table without doing it. I'm sanding the bottom first. I'm doing that just so I can get the legs attached. Just once I get the legs attached, it'll be a little easier to work on this thing. And before I attach the legs, I'm going to try to put in some of this steel C-channel. I try to do this for most, if not all, of my tables. It really helps keep it solid and limit the amount of warping or anything like that if the wood decides it wants to do so. I normally get this stuff off of line, but lately it has been killing me in shipping costs. So I went to my local welding shop down the street and ended up getting it for a fraction of the price. It was a bit more labor intensive as I had to cut it and kind of polish it and paint it, but it was a lot cheaper. Once the channels are routed out, I'm drilling some holes for the threaded inserts. Here I am putting the threaded inserts in, and then eventually bolting everything into place. Okay, now comes the tricky part, is routering this out. I went ahead and stenciled it on with some spray paint, and I'm starting out with the Dremel tool just to kind of get the real small parts like the eyes and the teeth. I'm going to move it over to a 1/8 inch router bit, and best advice I can give you with this is just go really slow and start out making shallow cuts and just take your time. Now I'm filling in the part that I routed out with some black tabletop resin, and once this is dry we'll come back and do the gold. Alright, next day our black resin is dry. I sanded off the excess and didn't think it'd be that easy to just add some gold in. So what I have to do is I have to router out the next part of the snake for the gold. And this part was far more tedious and difficult, but considering it was all done by hand, I think I did an alright job. And before pouring the gold resin, I'm just kind of sanding off some rough edges, cleaning it up a bit. And next day we're sanding off the excess and then moving on to, we're continuing on with my favorite part, which is basically sanded. So I'm going to go ahead and sand the top and then move into some polishing. And right off the bat, polishing compound here gave me a nice money shot. Anyways, I am using Festool's 3-step system. There are 3 separate bottles of space like a liquid sandpaper. Each one is a little finer in compound. And this is probably about a half an hour of polishing, just little by little until you get everything just right. Done polishing, and now this is an idea I had, and I will be honest, going into this I had no idea if I was going to like it or regret it. Had the idea of putting just some random burn marks in it, make it a little more rustic. Once I kind of did that, I'll be honest, I really didn't like it, but I was somewhat married to the idea because I just took a torch to the wood. So what I decided to do after that is basically torch the whole wood, not to the point where I'm charring it, but if you take a torch lightly to this wood, you'll see here, it makes the grain pop pretty nice. And so I decided to just go ahead and do that over the whole table, and in the end I ended up really liking it actually. That was some mineral oil I just poured on it and wiping it down, and you can tell those bird marks, I think, really look nice all said and done here. Once this dries, went ahead and buffed some Odie's oil into it, and this table is done and ready.